They said the earth screamed when he ruled, not from war, not from fire, but from the silent forest of stakes, each bearing a lifeless warning. 20,000 bodies, skewered like morbid trophies, lined the roads and fields of his empire. No invader dared breathe too loud. No enemy returned home unchanged. This was no ordinary king. He didn't just command fear, he engineered it. His power wasn't built on gold or bloodlines. It was built on terror, sharpened at both ends. When empires marched against him, they found not battlefields, but graveyards waiting. And when the wind howled through that forest of impaled souls, even the bravest men dropped their swords and ran. You've heard of tyrants, monsters, legends, but none like this. What drives a man to turn his land into a living nightmare? And why, centuries later, does his name still haunt the pages of history? This is the story of the man who ruled with 20-0 stakes. He wasn't born into power. He was thrown into the flames of it. From the moment he opened his eyes, the world offered him no comfort, only bloodlines soaked in betrayal, and a name cursed with expectations. His father, a ruler entangled in foreign politics, sold him and his brother into the hands of an enemy empire. Hostage, that was his title before any crown ever touched his brow. Inside those stone walls, among the cold and cruelty of his captors, he watched men flayed, dismembered, broken, until the idea of mercy died inside him. But he learned, he studied his enemies, their weaknesses, their arrogance. He didn't forget the whips, the chains, the loneliness. No, he stored every memory like a blade waiting to be drawn. And when the day came to return home, he didn't come back as a boy. He came back forged, silent, deliberate, calculating, and vengeance walked beside him. The throne he claimed wasn't inherited, it was taken. And those who stood in his way, they didn't fall in battle. They were displayed like warnings. A prince returned not with songs of peace, but with silence and stakes. You see, empires don't fear those born with crowns. They fear those who earned theirs by crawling through hell, and survived with eyes still burning. That's where the real story begins. He didn't just seize the throne. He reshaped it in his image. This wasn't some royal court filled with velvet and courtesies. No, it was a fortress carved out of fear, and the moment he sat down, the rules changed. He didn't ask for loyalty, he demanded obedience. The corrupt skinned alive, the greedy boiled, the disloyal impaled, their bodies left swaying in the wind as a reminder that betrayal had a cost, and it was always paid in full. He didn't need spies. Fear did the talking. Word spread like wildfire. If you stole, if you lied, if you betrayed even once, your body would hang on a spike before the sun touched the sky. Entire towns whispered his name like a curse, and yet crime vanished, order ruled, roads were safe, merchants unbothered, and no one dared to steal so much as a coin. Why? Because everyone knew what waited at the end of a sharpened pole. He didn't govern. He gripped his land by the throat and dared it to breathe. And behind every judgment wasn't just cruelty, it was calculation. Every execution was theater. Every display a performance designed to break the will of enemies and citizens alike. The stakes weren't just weapons, they were words. Warnings carved into flesh. Because when justice looks like horror, no one ever forgets the man who delivered it. There's cruelty, and then there's what he did next. At the height of his reign, when whispers of rebellion crept in from all sides, and foreign armies loomed at his borders, he made a choice that would echo across history. 20,000 people, not soldiers, not warriors, civilians, prisoners, dissidents, anyone he saw as a threat to his order, rounded up, condemned, and impaled, one by one. Some were still breathing when the stakes pierced them. Others watched their families writhe before they met the same fate, and he didn't flinch. He ordered it not out of rage, but precision. A message written in bodies, not words. An entire forest of stakes stretched across the horizon like some grotesque monument to control. Imagine marching toward battle, only to see your path lined with the dead limp, silent, swaying in the breeze. No swords drawn, no resistance, just death waiting in rows. It wasn't madness, it was mastery. He understood what most rulers never grasped. Fear, when sharpened, becomes a weapon more effective than any blade. That field of impaled souls didn't just stop one army, it froze empires. And he watched it all unfold with cold calculation, knowing no tale would ever compete with what the world saw that day. Because when 20,000 bodies speak for you, you never have to raise your voice again. When the Empire finally came for him, they didn't send scouts. They sent legions. Seasoned warriors, elite commanders, men who had crushed cities and burned kingdoms to the ground. To them, he was a minor ruler. A bump in the road, an irritation to be crushed underfoot. That's what they thought until they crossed his border. There was no army waiting, no lines of archers, no fortress bristling with soldiers, just silence and then the stench. As they moved deeper, the wind changed. What they saw next broke them. Thousands upon thousands of stakes stretched across the land, each one bearing a corpse in various states of decay. Some fresh, some skeletal, all of them real. Some were even soldiers from previous skirmishes. Others were civilians. The forest had become a graveyard and the road into his kingdom a trail through hell. Hardened warriors dropped to their knees. Commanders lost the will to advance. Men who'd survived years of battle turned and begged to go home. Not because of what they were fighting, but because of what they saw, and he knew that. He didn't need to win the war. He only needed to make them fear what it would cost to fight him. No fortress could have done what that forest of the dead did. Because when your enemies see their future nailed to the road ahead, you've already won without lifting a sword. People still argue about what he really was. A monster, a madman, or something far more dangerous. A man who understood power better than anyone else. It's easy to look at what he did and call it evil. And yes, on the surface, it was horrifying. But look closer, and it gets harder to ignore the strategy underneath the blood. His land was surrounded by threats, invaders from the outside, traitors from within. He didn't have the luxury of mercy. He couldn't afford diplomacy dressed in weakness, so he chose a language everyone understood, fear. Not whispers behind closed doors, fear out in the open. Public, loud, terrifying, and somehow it worked. Crime dropped to nearly nothing. Foreign powers hesitated before even approaching his borders. Even his fiercest critics admitted that roads under his rule were safer than any neighboring kingdom. He didn't need walls, his reputation did the guarding. He didn't need an army watching every gate, terror already lived in every village, doing the work for him. So, was it cruelty or calculation? That's the question no one can fully answer. Maybe it's both. Maybe he blurred the line so completely that even he forgot where it was. But what's certain is this: he wasn't driven by madness alone. He was driven by intent. Every horror had a purpose. Every stake had a message. And when fear becomes a system, it stops being madness and starts being policy. Centuries have passed, and still, his name clings to the edge of legend, not as a king, not even as a man, but as a symbol. Entire books, movies, and nightmares have been built on his legacy. They turned him into a monster, a vampire, a creature that feeds on fear and blood. And maybe that's fitting, because the truth is, his story outgrew history a long time ago. But peel back the myth, and what's left is something even more unsettling. A real man with real choices who walked willingly into darkness and made it his home. He didn't vanish into obscurity like so many forgotten rulers. No, his name was stitched into the fabric of fear itself. And while others ruled with charm, alliances, and coin, he built his power from something deeper, something primal terror. He didn't need to live forever. Fear did it for him. His tactics may have been brutal, even unforgivable. But no one could ignore him. He carved his story into the earth, one stake at a time, and made sure the world would remember not just what he did, but how it felt to live under him. You can erase borders, you can rewrite books, but you can't silence a legacy built on the screams of the world. Because when fear is your monument, time never dares to tear it down. You want to understand power, then forget crowns, forget bloodlines. Power isn't inherited, it's taken. It's built on choices most men are too afraid to make. He didn't just rule a kingdom, he ruled the human psyche. His enemies had armies, he had fear, and fear doesn't sleep. It doesn't fade. It survives generations, creeping into stories, into myths, into the very idea of what a man can become when he decides the world will remember him, no matter the cost. So ask yourself, was he a monster? Or was he a mirror showing us the price of control when you stop pretending to be good? Because some men leave behind castles, others leave behind legends. He left behind a forest of stakes, and not one has fallen.